So, hi, I'm Pastor Shad. I'm the NextGen Pastor here at North Parkway. It's great to be with you guys. I'm excited to give you the word today. Hope you guys had a great Christmas and good holidays coming up. Speaking of Christmas, we're going to go right into it. Have you ever gotten a gift that maybe you didn't need or maybe you asked for, but you didn't end up using it for a long time? Like you've gotten a gift and then all of a sudden you just put it somewhere and you kind of forgot about it for a long, long time. I've definitely done that before. And especially with the ones that maybe you didn't think you needed, but then all of a sudden when you're like, oh, I know I have this thing hidden somewhere. A couple of years ago, I got given 2 snare drums. And now if you know, most drummers only play with one. So only one at a time. So one of them didn't get used as much. So right away I put one to use, but then the other one was just sitting around. And then finally, about 3 weeks ago, I had somebody ask me for a different snare drum. And I said, oh, hi, how are you? And then I said, oh, I have an extra one laying around. I know I can get that to use for you. And so I went and got it, and I've been using it here at the church since I went and got it for him. But the point of that is, when you went to find the thing that you hid, or maybe not hid, but just kind of forgot about, what gets on it? Dust, right? Dust and dirt. So by the time I went and got that snare drum, it was covered in dirt and dust. So I had to wipe it off, make it all presentable, and be ready to play. Now, when you don't use the things that you've been given, you don't use these gifts and right away, dust, maybe even rust, or maybe it's been so long that it's animal infested now, especially if it's food, right? If you forget about food, they're going to get into it. So all of these things, if you don't use them, it's important to find a use for them because they'll start to go bad and do wrong things with them. So dust and rust, those things are bad, right? But think about if the unused gift that you had to give was an inhaler for your neighbor who needs it because they can't breathe. That's a different kind of bummer. There are some life-bettering and life-saving items collecting dirt here in Pekin. They're right under your nose, but today we're going to learn how to find them. And we're going to jump right into the Bible with that because it'll help us find them. All right, so as a youth pastor and children's pastor, my kids know that I love to use these stories. So what are we using today, kids? A parable. That's right. So we are going to use the parable of the 3 servants, or you might know it as the parable of the talents. Now, what is a parable? An earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And who tells these parables? Jesus tells us these parables. Sorry, I had to call in response. It's what we do. All right, so we're going to get right into this parable. Here we go. Matthew chapter 25, verse 14 through 30. Verse 14. Again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities. Then he left on his trip. So pretty fair, right? The things are divvied up the way that the person in charge sees fit, right? You give things to the person or people that you think can do that task and do it well. So the master was fair about that. Continuing in verse 16, the servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest the money and earned 5 more. The servant with 2 bags of silver also went to work and earned 2 more. But the servant who only received 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money away. Or hid the master. Relating this to our lives and our stories, God in the story, right? Jesus is telling this, God is the master, right? And we are his servants. And God has given us these things to do his work. So in some of your lives, you may say, well, I'm a jack of all trades. I know how to do these 5 things and do them all well. Sorry if that's you, because I don't like you very much, because I can't do that. Now, most of you might have 2 things that you're really, really good and really solid at, and you're ready to go. And then there's some of you that have been given the one thing, and you know it's from God, and you know that it was for you, but you're holding on to it and keeping it safe. Keeping it clean, not letting rust or dirt get to it. You're just holding on to it. And let me tell you, that's not what we want to do, and that's not what God wants us to do. How do I know? Well, continuing the story. Verse 19. After a long time, the master returned from his trip and called them to give an account of how they had used his money. The servant to whom he entrusted the 5 bags of silver came forward with 5 more and said, Master, you gave me 5 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 5 more. The master was full of praise. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. The servant who had received 2 bags of silver came forward and said, Master, you gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 2 more. The master said, Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. And then there was this last guy. The last servant. Then the servant with 1 bag of silver came and said, Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. Look, here's your money back. Now, I don't know if any of you have had an experience where you have maybe been talking to your mom or dad, and you've been talking like you're so proud of what you just did. So you have a smile of pride on your face because, look at what I did, Mom. Look at what I did, Dad. And you're so confident. I just imagine in that moment, the servant was that confident with his master saying, I hid the money. Look at what I did. Aren't you proud of me? But the master replied, You wicked and lazy servant. That smile's gone now, isn't it? That smile just wiped away. As soon as that was said, I'm sure the servant was like, oh, I'm in for it now. So, if you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I could have got some interest on it. Then he ordered, Take the money from this servant and give it to the one with 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Now throw this useless servant into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This story ends pretty rough, right? As soon as that ends, it's at the beginning it was saying it was depicting heaven, but we all know that at the end it was depicting where that servant was going as well. Now, I know that none of you here want that for your life. But can anyone here also say that you don't want to do anything with what you've been given, with the things that you've been given? I don't think any of you could say that. I think if you've been given something, you want to be able to use it. But I also think a lot of you would say you would do more if you were given more. That you haven't been given enough, or you would do more if God told you what to do. If he gave you step-by-step instructions of, this is what I gave you, use it in this way. If God gives you a roadmap, you might be more willing to use it. Sometimes he's not going to do that. Sometimes we have to reflect in ourselves and realize what he's already given us. So today, we're going to do that. We're going to realize the talents and strengths and gifts, all of these things that God has already given to us. And we're going to put those into action. Now, all of these things that he's given us may not seem like big ministry opportunities, big things that we can use for him, but it is all for him. Now, we said most of you might feel like you only have one bag to work with. And you might feel like there's nothing in that bag to keep going and keep going after God. That brings us to our first point. There's more in your bag than you realize. As soon as you start reaching around in there and figuring out what you have, you're going to start to realize God's given me way more than I thought he did. All these things that I didn't even think could bless God in those ways, we'll be able to do that. And now a biblical example of that is a guy named Moses. Moses pleads with God to send someone else. God tells him to look at what he already has. And now, what I want you guys to realize is, when you are looking at your only single bag, you're thinking, God, you gave me this stuff, but what if I'm not ready? Why would you waste this gift on me? Or some of you just don't even realize the potential of what he has given you. It's still sitting on the ground right by your feet, but you just haven't picked it up yet. And that's what we're going to look at in Exodus chapter 4, verses 1 through 4. But Moses protested again. What if they won't believe me or listen to me? What if they say, the Lord never appeared to you? Then the Lord asked him, what is in your hand? A shepherd's staff, Moses replied. Throw it down on the ground, the Lord told him. So Moses threw down the staff, and it turned into a snake. Moses jumped back. Then the Lord told him, reach out and grab its tail. So Moses reached out and grabbed it, and it turned back into a shepherd's staff in his hand. So I don't know if you know this, but all the depictions of Moses in the Bible and all of his stories, he's standing there with a shepherd's staff, right? All throughout the Bible, it's always there. And this isn't just the only story that appears in, right? When he split the Red Sea, he stuck the staff in the ground and the sea split. So Moses had been carrying this thing around, and God says, what's in your hand? What's already right here that you're touching? The thing that you're already touching is the thing that I'm going to use and show miracles through. And God did, right? Like we talked about, different times in Moses' life, he used that staff as part of those things. Now, more in your bag than you realize, right? So I've had this backpack up here the whole time. You guys don't know what it is in it, but I do. But say hot cocoa. You could serve that to people and maybe make them feel good, have a drink, right? What about money? You can be generous with your money. You've been given money on this earth. You can also be generous with it. No, I'm not giving it away. What about changing diapers? You can be generous with the care of children if you have that ability. Some of you do not. It's okay. We still love you. What if you're a handyman? You can use a hammer to build stuff and make stuff for people. Second point is, some of the most important stuff that God trusted you with won't seem quite spiritual. Half of that stuff in the bag, did it relate to church? Some of it did. Like we have cocoa here and things like that and coffee to serve people. But also, you can have those conversations and things outside of church as well. You can be generous with your time and the things that you do outside of church as well as inside of church. So, what I want you to realize right now is the things that you already have. Mark, if you'd come up. All right, so right now, we are going to do an activity. I know. The NextGen Pastor is making you do something. Okay, so all of you should have a handout. And if you don't, it should be somewhere close. You are going to go ahead, and we're going to take 5 minutes right now, and even our folks online, take 5 minutes, and you're going to pair up with a partner for these 5 minutes, and you're going to discuss and talk about the things that can be already in your life and be used. And like I said, some of these things won't seem quite spiritual, but God has given you these things, and He's wanting you to use them. Now we're going to go off of the 3 different groups. I'll just read them real quickly and give you some examples. What is one group that you have access to? What group you're a part of. All of us have jobs or school, and maybe if you don't have a job or school, you're here at church, right? So that can be a group as well. What's a physical resource you own or manage? We already talked about money and giving that and being generous with your money. And then also a life experience that someone else could relate to. There are a lot of you that have already been through a stage of life that someone is just about to get into. You can be generous with your knowledge and the experience that you've had from the things that you've already been through. So I'm going to give you that time right now. I kind of went at this a little bit before, but the next point is the most of the stuff that God has trusted you with is for use outside of these walls. I said that half the stuff in the bag wasn't all for church things, right? God can use you even when you aren't in this building, or even when you're not around the people that are in this building. Now, while this sermon wasn't a go sermon, a go and do something, this was a reflection sermon where you looking at the things that you have and the things that you have already been gifted with, it prepares you to go. It prepares you to be ready for the full potential of what God has for you. Once you've found that gift that you've had all along, God expects you to use it. One more prop, because I'm a youth pastor and I have to. Now, this puppet, it's pretty useless if it's just laying around. It's just a thing. It doesn't do anything. Now, if there's someone's hand inside of it and operating it, it comes to life. And it can do things. Now, in our youth ministry, we do what's called fine arts. I don't know if everyone knows what that means. And our fine arts group, we develop, and deploy the talents that God has given us. Now, sometimes in that ministry, teenagers don't even know what a puppet is or what puppets were until we tell them, hey, this is what it is. And then when we get their hands on it and doing the ministry, they're like, oh, we're cool. We got this, right? They know how to do it because they finally put their hands on it and it's finally in motion. One of my favorite things in ministry is seeing people grow in their gifts. Kids and teenagers, more than adults, or maybe not more than adults, have to be physically forced into those things sometimes, and sometimes those gifts have to be pulled out of them. They don't know that this is what God wanted in their lives, but you see it, and you can see the fact that God can bless them and use them through what gifts He has already given them. Now, the time that we just took, and I know, sorry, I made you do something right here, right now. We just took the time of thinking of what we already have and the things that we've already had placed in our lives. Now that we see those things, after you did that activity, you might have found one or two things. Now that you see those things, now it's time to put your hands on it and in it and go use those things and take them and use them for God's glory. Last point is this. God expects us to utilize what we've been given. I just said it. Pretty simple. If we see it, we use it. Once we see it, we need to be hands-on, going after what He has for us. Find what's been there all along. Don't hide it away or sit on it. We already know that the ending of the story of the parable of the talents, gnashing of teeth. If you're sitting on your gifts, it's not what God wants from us. Now, some of you here or online may not know Jesus. And I just want to take the time right now to go over that. And you may say, Pastor Shad, what gifts? God hasn't given me anything. Wrong. God's given you everything. He's given His Son, who, even in this season, we celebrated His birth. But not only His birth, but lived a sinless life and died on the cross for us. Because without Jesus dying on the cross for us, the wages of our sin is death. But the gift that God gave His Son dying on the cross gives us eternal life. So right now, with heads bowed and eyes closed, if that is you and you just feel like you need to make a change in your life and you want Jesus to be the Lord of your life, you want God to give you everything that He has for you, if you just raise your hand right now. And online, if you just type in, pray for me. Now, you can look up again. Now, those of you that know Jesus and have been with Jesus and gotten to know God and the things that He has for you, you've gotten gifts from God. You know what He's done in your life and the path that you've walked because of Him. So now the step to take is to be a doer in His name with the gifts that you already had all along. Now, this is the last service of the year, right? So we're going into new things and changing the way we're looking at things. And we want to look at something differently, so we we have to change how we look at it. And here's how we're going to do that. We've already been over it a couple times. But when you know what God's done in your life, you have to keep doing things in His name. And some of you are sitting here and I made you do this ridiculous activity and you're going to say, I'm not doing enough? Because some of you feel that way. You feel like you are completely busy all the time. You're just strung out with all the things of life and you say, you want me to do more? No, I just want you to change the way you're looking at it. I want you to change the I'm not doing enough to I get to do God's work with what He's already given me. The tools that I already have, I get to use them.
Hey there, just wanted to take a minute to say thanks for watching. If a friend sent you this link, it's because they believe what we talked about today is going to make a positive impact in your life. And if it did, there's probably somebody that you care about who could benefit from it. So take a minute to share this video with somebody. Post it to your timeline or send them a direct link. And if you're able, take a minute to give using the link at the bottom of the description on this video. One last thing. Maybe you feel a tug at your soul and you're ready to take the next step in your spiritual life and form a relationship with God. We've got folks here who would love to talk with you about it. So just text prayer to the number on your screen and we'll follow up with you. It's also in the description on this video in case that helps. Thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.